Hey guys, welcome back to Results Junkies podcast. Back from my first trip on the road and already sick of travel in 2025. Mr. Singh, you're getting ready to head onto a plane, if I remember correctly.
I am. I'm nowhere near the road warrior that you are, but quick day trip to Nashville before this episode gets posted, then down to Florida next week for 2 days for a board meeting.
Nice.
Blah, blah, blah. So nowhere exotic for me.
Well, it is what it is. All right, so let's get into it. We're going to talk a little bit about AI and Nvidia in sort of unrelated terms. I've got an article about port workers that we want to touch on because I think there's some interesting metrics in here that founders of durable goods or manufacturing should definitely be thinking about. From a housekeeping standpoint, show at resultsjunkies.com is how you track us down. He is at Paul Singh on all those social media channels, and I am at Pizza in Motion. So let's tee up this dock workers thing. I think it's interesting. So if you'll recall, there was a strike last year, and they settled some issues. The longshoremen got pay raises. I won't use words like big, even though I think 62% is a big pay raise, because I'm sure the longshoremen would disagree with me. But these guys are getting handsome pay raises over the next 6 years. But there were some disagreements on automation in the ports, and you and I talked a little bit about this at pre-show that the ports are really rife for automation. Containers are generally speaking all the same size. Weights can certainly be calculated ahead of time before they get to the port. So lots of things that could be automated there, and the port workers are resisting, which is understandable because it eliminates jobs. I think there were a couple things that are interesting here. First off, these salaries put longshoremen at an average salary of $200,000 a year. So I think that contributes to this overall cost of what it takes to move goods from somewhere else. The other thing that's interesting is they note in the article, in the past year, the cost of shipping a container overseas has risen 60%. And as you well know, shipping costs went up during COVID as well. So over the last 4 years, there were general increases. And now there's a 60% increase year over year. And I think this funnels back into this concept of, I've generally stayed away from investing in startups that invest in durable goods. We've done a handful of hardware manufacturing, if you will. It's very cash intensive. And it makes me think that with the potential of tariffs to knock on top of this, places like Mexico, Central America are starting to look very appealing as areas of manufacturing. They already do a number of different things in those countries in terms of manufacturing durable goods and even some technology. And with these sorts of costs to get a container overseas, I think it really does start to change this model of, you build it in Shenzhen, you ship it down to Hong Kong, and you put it on a boat.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so first of all, obviously from a personal standpoint, there's no scenario in which physical goods are not still required, right? You still got to buy your deodorant. You still got to buy, the bicycle tire, whatever it is. That being said, though, I don't know about you, but for me, like, I'm even more like, it's like every day that goes by over these last couple of years, the bar that I have mentally to invest in another physical product company gets higher and higher and higher, because it's just like, this is just another sort of like risk now to anybody that's currently exposed to startups that ship a physical product, where it's like, okay, so if you're sitting in a quarterly board meeting with an early stage company now like this, it's kind of like, okay, what's your plan if, the tariffs affect you, or if the costs double, or the ports shut down. So that's probably not the most helpful kind of, what's the word? It's not like the most helpful maybe commentary on this, but I think that this is like such a difficult thing, because Dana's side of the family are all longshoremen.
Yeah.
And so
there goes those listeners.
Oh, I was gonna say, from my perspective, this is one of those topics where, like, as we were going through the holidays and stuff, it's like, we're just not going to touch on that at all.
Yeah.
Politics and the ports are the two things we are not talking about during any Thanksgiving through Christmas sort of thing. That being said, though, I mean, it's just, it's tough all around, because ports all over the rest of the world have already begun to heavily automate. And as far as I understand it, we are probably one of the last developed nations that have not. So
yeah, we're definitely behind on automation. I think to your point about investing in durable goods companies, I think, we talked last week about venture debt, being more prevalent as you get higher in the stack of investing. There's definitely cash out there for startups to get started, but hardware startups need more cash generally. They need it in a different way than a software startup does. But now you're talking about a cash intensive business, and I think one of the things that's also you can't say it changed recently because this has changed during COVID, but I think we continue to see examples of this. 2 potential port strikes in less than a year, another strike, call it 15 months before that. It used to be that if you manufactured a durable good, you could sort of set it and forget it. It was, okay, well, I know what my forecasts are. I know how much I have to move from China at a certain time. And I think, jokingly people talk about, you see all the memes on Instagram and TikTok, if it still exists when this episode drops, of, why is there Christmas stuff in Costco in September? And the answer is, it's because they ordered it early just in case they got screwed, and it showed up and they didn't have anywhere else to put it. So they put it in the store. And, there's, the supply chain still has significant disruption in that way. And so the distance that's in the supply chain now, if there is a backup at the ports, just the way the system is designed nowadays, that can set you back months in terms of a stable supply chain.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, nobody ever thinks about it, but it's one of those things where you don't really think about it until you've seen it. Once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. It's kind of like the Target, but you and I, everybody that's listened for a while knows you and I live pretty close to each other. It's like, pick a Target, like the Target Superstore between our 2 houses over in Leesburg. And it's like, you start to notice right around maybe July or August, a bunch of shipping containers are just sitting on the asphalt behind that building.
Yeah.
And now you know what those are, right? It's like the holiday stuff is just piling up, getting ready to get put out there in October or whatever. So once you see it, you can't unsee it. So I don't know. I mean, another strike is not going to be fun for anybody, but it's going to affect everybody. And I don't know. It's one of those things that's unfortunate to see, and you wish that like the negotiators would sort of like sort it out. But it's hard not to understand both sides of it, right? You're part of a union. Your job was, you were told your whole life your job was safe, but now here comes automation.
Yeah, no, I definitely get it. And I think, we talked about this on the show a long time ago, might even have been pre-COVID, to be honest. But, we had an investment in a company that sold products to Sam's Club and Costco, and at roughly the same times. And we learned back then that Costco has regional distribution centers where they can hold goods, and that Sam's Club uses a philosophy called cross-docking, meaning the goods are coming off of a truck in, say, Kansas on one side, and they're going right back onto another truck, that there's not a stopping point. And so because there aren't regional distribution centers in the Sam's Club chain, the product can only move as fast as the rest of the system. So if one part of it gets congested, there's no spot to leave the Christmas stuff on the dock if it's there early or late. It just sort of needs to keep moving. Right. And that leads to all these complications. So I think that's a good place to put a button on that. Next topic up is another interesting one that, I'll be honest, I'm not an expert on, but it fascinates me that we've gotten here this quickly. So we'll link to this in the show notes, but there's now an open source reasoning AI model that you can get into for under $500. And so what a reasoning AI model is, and I'm sure I'm going to sound stupid when I say this, is that a reasoning AI model is actually able to help sort of like self-police the answers that it gives. And typically most folks are relying on ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or Grok or whatever you're using, and that those databases, are using inference and reasoning to come up with answers for you that are reliably accurate. And now we're at this point where if you wanted to individually build your own model for $500, you can do that, which I think is amazing given how quickly everything, I think it really illustrates how quickly things are accelerating in the AI world.
Well, we talked a little bit about this concept during various parts of the tech tour years ago, but one of the things I would say is this notion or this idea that we all have this incredible ability to vastly overestimate how long it will take for certain industries to trail off. And on the flip side of that coin, we tend to also drastically overestimate how long it'll take for new things to pick up. Are you familiar with the concept of Moore's Law? Does that ring a bell?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So something we studied I was a electrical engineering major going through undergrad, and one of the things that we talked quite a bit about years and years ago was this idea of Moore's law, which is largely applied to CPUs and GPUs.
Mhm.
And the idea basically is that the number of transistors on a chip tends to double just about every 2 years or so. And
Yep.
anyway, what's interesting is that like not only has that law generally remained applicable to GPUs, but it's also been like underestimating how fast we've grown with GPU usage. I think Jensen Huang from Nvidia on a recent shareholder call, said something like that there was that they had anticipated, or they had seen a 25x increase in compute power over the last 5 years, which is much faster than we would have expected with Moore's law. And
Yeah.
so there's a bunch of competing theories on why that's happened, but by and large, it's kind of this combination of the physical architecture is getting more efficient, but as our own understanding as a society of like, how physics and all those things apply on the chips. That all I'm saying is the point is that GPUs are sort of, it's hard to explain this, but given the amount of computations a GPU can do, the improvements we're seeing, whether it's through training or the usage of these things, is happening at a much faster scale than any of us really understand. The problem, however, is our ability as a society to find a solution that these things can be used on has not increased at a similar pace. In other words, if you and I were to like maybe draw a bar chart of the number of new models that are available,
Yeah.
it would probably increase up and to the right at a certain slope. But I mean, I don't know about you. I can't think of like, other than using AI to maybe search my email faster, me as an average user, I'm not using it 25x more over the last 5 years. It's not increasing at the same rate. So I think there's still an opportunity somewhere in there for founders to maybe operationalize it. But I don't know. There's something very interesting happening here, though. Is that like you've got new models coming out. In this particular case, it says that the model was trained with like something like $450 worth of compute time, which is pretty cheap, all things considered. But I don't know. It's not really something you and I are using just yet.
Well, and to that point, you were talking about, just the way that things are accelerating and this, personal use, if you will, and not really, to your point, like I don't really spend a bunch of time intentionally using AI models at the moment. I'm sure that will change, but clearly lots of companies are starting to bet on that because one of Nvidia's announcements at CES was that they're releasing a personal computer that's going to be plus or minus $3,000. Personal is probably the wrong way to say it, but a desktop computer that you could build your own LLM on, at home or in the office at, quite frankly, a price point that's cheaper than the Mac Studio that I have sitting on my desk that we're recording on right now.
Yeah.
And I can't think of what the use case is for that for me right now, but I have to think NVIDIA is smart enough to believe that there is a use case for it.
I wouldn't be. I mean, I haven't seen that announcement, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was like a gaming computer or something like that. I mean, I think about my 18-year-old nephew, who for a long time had to piece computer pieces together to get the gaming rig that he wanted. And
yeah,
if something like this was already pre-built, that might have maybe been a little bit more economical. I think that if I was a betting person, I think what's going to happen here is that as more and more of these models go open source, kind of like the one that you referenced here, I think where we're headed is like the next big leap is going to be these agents, meaning like, right now with ChatGPT and things like that, you type in a question and it, goes through its body of knowledge and gives you some answer. But, I think where it's going to get really interesting is these agents that are able to take a question, control your computer, and go do something. So maybe an example that you might that might actually trigger you is if I was to be able to go to an agent, an AI agent, and say, find all flights between Dulles and Tampa that have an aisle seat on the right side available in first class on a 757.
Yeah.
And tell me what those options are. It would then go into behind the scenes. It would control my browser, go to Google Google Flights and whatever, all these things. That sort of agent, that's going to get really interesting. And I think we're almost there. I think OpenAI's already hinted at this, and a couple other startups. I actually saw somebody in a recent Y Combinator batch might be doing this as well. But the point is, though, is that I think that's where things get really, really interesting for employers. Maybe not necessarily like you at Five Guys, but like when I think about our business at Strata, it seems to me that maybe 5 years from now, if you were to ask me a simple question of how many people are on your team, I think in 5 years, like, so just to hold myself accountable, I think
Yep.
by 2030, because we're recording this in 2025, I think by 2030, if you were to ask me how many employees I have at Strata or wherever, I think I would say something like, yep, I got 125 humans and I've got 10,000 AI agents doing certain things.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't doubt that. But I also don't know. I'm not saying you're wrong. I don't know if I don't know if you'll categorize them as 10,000 agents at that point, or if it'll just be a software service that you subscribe to, or if you'll
Yeah.
drive your own internal LLM. I think there are a lot of interesting paths that companies will take. And I think when we look at 5 years from now, I don't even necessarily think that AI is fully baked at that point. I think we'll obviously see lots of acceleration, but I think there'll still be lots of room to run and room for new models to develop. So
Right. Yep. Yep.
so let's close on a developing topic. You brought this up as one of the things that I noted in our group chat. Right now, the presidential administration, the Biden administration, is restricting access for foreign countries to some of the chips that are being built in the U.S. And Nvidia has been fairly vocal about their objection to this. We obviously have a new administration coming in not long after this episode drops. Unclear how they will react. But it's an interesting time in terms of where these chips will end up and quite frankly, the next phase of the technology Cold War, if you will.
Yep. Well, I think no, I might be wrong about this, but the thing is, this idea that we're talking about has already existed for a long time. So in other words,
Yeah.
if you think about those like little I forget what they're called, like the RSA security keys that you use for like to access your bank or authenticate with other
Yeah.
websites. For a long time, that technology could not be exported outside the U.S. Or even encryption, right? Like we're used to 128-bit encryption, but
Mhm.
for the longest time, anything higher in terms of like, encryption was prohibited from being sold outside the US. And now you could kind of argue that like people got around it and other places figured out how to do it eventually. But this is the reason why this article is probably getting any sort of traction right now, the one that you're talking about, is probably because I don't think we've ever had a scenario where like Intel wasn't allowed to ship a CPU chip outside the US.
Sure.
And now Nvidia is kind of crying foul because they may get blocked from selling these things outside. So I think what I was trying to say in a poorly articulated way is that conceptually, the idea of limiting certain types of high tech hardware, outside the U.S., that's not a new thing. That's
Yeah.
existed for decades. Now it's just happening to affect probably the darling child of this hardware. I don't know. We'll see where it goes, but I have a hard time feeling bad for them. Oh no, you can't sell 50,000 units to a data center in Argentina. Oh no,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Oh
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it develops. It's certainly not an area of expertise for me in terms of which chips are being restricted and which chips aren't. But it just shows, I think, that that there's concern at the regulatory level on what these things can do and how they could be used elsewhere. And to some degree, using China as the example, I've seen, having read multiple articles, I've seen two different positions here in favor of the legislation. And to be clear, I'm not speaking in favor of the legislation. There are some that talk about it from the risk of giving these to China for their ability to build, next gen war technology. And then there's just the other side of it of, well, if we export over the newest, latest, and greatest chips to China, will they steal that technology? I think there are multiple questions out there that we just don't know the answer to at this point. So I think it's going to be an interesting one to see develop, especially because of, to your point, how much news Nvidia has made with their chips.
yeah, yeah, agreed. Well, I think the other thing is we're also talking about the world in 2025, and maybe I'll get in trouble for this, but the thing is like you can put all the legislation in place, but people will find a way. Yeah,
Oh
like
yeah,
what stops you from hypothetically going to I don't know, Best Buy or Amazon and overpaying for a unit here and then throwing it into the back of a suitcase. Like I can't imagine that like some TSA agent somewhere looks at that thing getting scanned through and says, "Oh, that unit's not allowed to leave."
Right.
I'm not saying anything to our friends at TSA. Please don't put me on the list. But you know, uh,
I'm gonna leave that one alone.
yeah, let's not touch that one. Yeah, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. I mean, the thing is that when you think about these chips, though, ultimately it is a sort of a war of like almost like a capex war that's happening right now.
Oh yeah,
like you and
the
I
numbers
both
are
know that a
massive.
bunch of the larger venture capital firms here in the U.S. have also, I shouldn't say a bunch. I know of at least 3 very large, well-known VC firms that have their own fleet of GPUs, and it's
Yeah,
part of their value add and the reason why
yeah,
certain founders should take their money. And we know that a bunch of corporates have been investing in startups, whether it's like Microsoft or Amazon. They've been investing in some of these startups that need access to GPUs. So the fact is, like, everybody's trying to get their hands on the hardware. But we'll see where it goes. I mean, I like I said, it's hard to feel bad for Nvidia not being able to sell or potentially not being able to sell. That being said, though, like you said, we've got a new administration coming in a couple days after this episode goes live, and um,
yeah,
maybe the tide changes all of a sudden. We'll see.
yeah.
There's
Well,
almost too much money on the line here for people to leave it on the table.
yeah, yeah. It's gonna be interesting to watch for sure. I mean, these chips are such a big cross section of everything that's going on right now.
I will say, as an investor, though, what is
Hmm.
so difficult, and this is like a first world problem, but like what is so difficult as an investor right now is to actually separate the signal from the noise right now. It seems like
Oh
every
gosh, yeah.
startup is like an AI startup now.
Hmm.
Every startup has their own model
Yeah,
or AI strategy, and you're like, it's hard to like really quickly differentiate between who's actually just air quotes just a wrapper on OpenAI versus who's actually doing something interesting. I still
yeah.
haven't figured that out, but
No,
um,
I would agree that that's yeah. That's why I'm so interested to see where things go because it really is hard for me to pick out winners right now in
yeah,
this space.
yeah, yeah.
I
We'll
got
see how it goes.
two housekeeping things. First, I mentioned last week that I was going to talk about a potential investment in a company. I don't have clearance from the founder just yet. I'm looking forward to talking about that when that founder's ready and maybe even having them on the show. But they were also very quickly oversubscribed. And, I mean, look, this is a second time founder. It's a business model that I believe in. So certainly there are a number of different reasons why they could be oversubscribed. But I also think it's a good indication that there's still plenty of money out there for enticing opportunities for startups. So that's number one. Number two, I would just say the footage out of California right now
Mm.
is just stunning to me. I don't know how much time you spent in Southern California, like driving the Pacific Coast Highway and going through Malibu and stuff like that. Those are areas I've driven through going back to when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine the devastation that's there. And I would say, not to make this overly political, because I don't think it's a political comment, but with as much stuff as is going on, it's disappointing to see how many fire safety experts have popped up on the various social media platforms. I mean, like the fires are still burning. There are people that don't have a place to live. It's just, it's stunning to me how much devastation there is there. And I wish that there was some magic wand I could wave, to make it go away.
The snarky comment I put somewhere on social media yesterday that added zero value to anyone was I posted this meme or something that was like, and just like that, everybody's an expert on municipal water supply systems.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Like, come on, guys. But yeah, it is horrible to see. Even the videos will never actually capture the breadth of the devastation. And I've driven through those areas, but I've never lived there.
No.
But somebody posted a video of for example, like the Malibu coast or whatever, and I'm like, oh man, I remember like walking through there, or driving through there, and having like walking meetings with people on that beach years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you look at some of those beaches now, and it's just like everything's gone. It's like literally nothing's there anymore.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's crushing to see. I think for me, like where I'd leave it is probably not too far off from where your meme is. It's like, look, I mean, today, why don't we focus on finding people and pets and sufficient homes, roofs over their head? There will be plenty of time to talk about municipal water supply and what the government should have done or shouldn't have done. It just feels like there's a time and a place, and I don't think you'd be standing around after a hurricane and sitting there and saying, why didn't they evacuate people sooner while the storm was still overhead? Like, there's a time and a place, and people make decisions. I'm not saying that the government made right decisions or wrong decisions. It's just like, I have friends that live out there, and there's still plumes of smoke over the top of the mountain on the other side of their house. Like, the fires are still burning. People need help. People need help there, and I think that's that's my soapbox for this week.
Well, I think I don't know how to segue from that without sounding horrible, but this time next week when we record, we'll be living in a brave new world without TikTok here in the U.S. Maybe. So
there's a fair shot of it at this point.
We will see what happens to what happens. I think it'll be interesting to see what fills the gap. I think, again, it's a bad transition from a very sensitive or very important topic that you brought up there, but I think there's some, just given like how pervasive TikTok has been in our culture here in the U.S. for the last couple of years, I do wonder what other product companies or similar companies are going to do to fill that gap or race to fill that gap.
I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'll go first just so I'm not putting you on the spot. I will go out on a limb and say that on February 1st, TikTok will still be available for download on the Google and the Apple App Store.
Well, my understanding is it's still going to be available for download. It's just, I believe it's blocked from new updates, but I could be grossly wrong about that.
Sorry, let me clarify. What I had heard was it won't be available for download, but you can still continue to use it. Either way, I would say I don't believe that they will be able to acquire new users. I do believe that they will still be able to acquire new users on February 1st in the U.S. That's my guess.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Well,
all right.
We will see how it goes, man.
Enjoy Tampa.
Yeah. Good luck picking up your frenemy from the airport.
Lap number 2.
Yeah, that sounds good. All right, man. I'll talk to you soon.